But true, I think, means measured based on facts, and that what you're looking at is not a perceived service level based on the number of people providing the service, but rather you're looking at the actual level of service provided, whether it's 2 people doing it or 22 people. So what service are they actually providing to people?
So you don't think that what we were provided with was factual?
No,
or alternative facts? I think you used that before.
Madam Speaker, I didn't say that. No, and please don't. I mean, don't put words in my mouth in that way.
No, you used it before.
I just said that we're going to come back with a report that is going to talk about, as best one can, based on facts and based on metrics, that I think the new general manager is very well equipped to do, of what those service levels were, in fact, before under what I'll call the current staffing arrangements, and what they would be under the proposed staffing arrangements. And I, for one, would be very interested in reading that report.
So what are the true impacts of restoring leaf pickup?
I'm sorry, what is the true impact of what?
Restoring leaf pickup in Etobicoke.
I don't, Madam Speaker, I certainly don't know what that has to do with this matter.
Well, I mean the level of scrutiny that was applied to restoring leaf pickup in Etobicoke. I'm just asking about what level of facts that you require.
Councillor Davis.
Well, I think in this case, if you believe as I do,
can I just clarify?
I'm sorry, sure, Madam Speaker.
Just let me clarify.
Leave Etobicoke alone.
Okay.
Yes, leave Etobicoke alone.
Can I please speak? Okay. Just for clarification.
$800,000.
Councillor Davis, please. Okay. Just for clarification, and to the mayor and to members that are asking questions. When members of council are asking the mayor questions, it's not only for clarification of the motion, but they can ask any question they want. Okay? So, Councillor Davis, you can continue. No, it's 5 minutes.
5 minutes to me.
It's 5 minutes of the mayor.
Goes with my job.
But it's just not on the motion. It could be on anything.
That's fine. It's not a problem, Madam Speaker.
Okay.
So, Mr. Mayor, you did, I think, call it Groundhog Day, and maybe because I said that earlier, because I can tell you these cuts have been here before, and they will continue to come, because when they continue, our staff continue to try and find the cuts that are required to meet an arbitrary and false target. They come forward with the only things that they think are even reasonably palatable. So would you not agree that it is possible, and as stated by the staff under questions, the only reason they brought forward these recommendations were to achieve the targets for cuts that they were given, and not because they believed that impacts weren't on services?
And Madam Speaker, I will answer that in this way to the councillor, which is to say what I said before. I have enough confidence in the professionalism and the compassion and the caring, the genuine caring of our public service to believe that about all the choices, do you want to tell me, because it's not in my head at the moment, what the total budget is of the shelter and housing budget? Out of that total, which is huge, it's a huge number, that if they wanted to save $1 million, and in fact they were asked at 2.6 to save a bit more, but if they want to save $1 million, that they would deliberately pick something they thought was going to have a really bad impact on the most vulnerable people. They picked that, I assume, based on their own language contained in the report, on the basis that it would have a minimal, and almost when you read the language it says that the service level, and I believe that it is possible, and you can't say it's impossible, that the people who are going to be there following these changes, if they get fully implemented, will do as good or better a job at providing for the people that are in our care as under the previous structure.
What I can say, Mr. Mayor, and I hope you will agree, my question is, would you agree that when you cut staffing who provide human services in long-term care, shelters, child care, any human service, that you reduce the level of service and the quality of that service?
Not necessarily, Madam Speaker, and that is why, and again, you know, no good deed goes unpunished in here. I specifically moved to have a thorough report written by our new general manager with a date on it that I think is as soon as it could practically be requested, to ask him, and by your questioning me on the true, I mean based on whatever facts he has available, to answer that question. And I've also undertaken to this chamber, and I think you know me to be a person of my word, that I will read that report with great care and see what he says and his teammates about this. And then we will perhaps discuss it again. But in the meantime, I don't know enough based on your word or somebody else's word to say that I will just vote not to make these changes. I don't. I'm supporting the analysis done previously by staff, by the Budget Committee, and others that have said this is a way in which we can go without harming the interests of our most vulnerable people.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher?
Thank you. I'm not going to be 5 minutes, but I know, Mr. Mayor, you know that there's work underway in CDR and with the shelter division on just looking at a bit of a new model in delivering shelter services. And this new approach, the timelines are kind of converging at the same time as your motion. And we are looking at relocating, I don't know how many, up to 15 shelters. So I'm just, I appreciate what you said, that it might not be as fast, and that I'd like to make sure that it's done in tandem with the new shelter approach. So we're not looking at the positions outside of what the new approach requires and the relocation of 15 shelters.
Well, Madam Speaker, I'll be perfectly honest. I picked the date in a sort of arbitrary manner, and the idea behind it was to get this report as soon as possible for two reasons. One, because I didn't want it to be done in isolation of the changes that you make reference to. And secondly, because I thought that by having a report as soon as April the 30th, a number of these changes might not even be made by that time, even though the budget dollars are what they are, because I am voting to keep the budget recommendation as it is. But given the fact that some of these people were going to be transferred to other positions in the public service, we know that based on the paperwork. So if you had a different date in mind, I didn't think it was practical to ask for a report much sooner. I think I initially said March 31st and thought that was too ambitious.
I'm just thinking that by the time that's tabled and we look at what the system might be, what the new requirements might be, it may push that out a little bit further. So I'm just...
I've told you my objectives, Madam Speaker.
and I understand your objective. I'm just hoping that you would agree that the tandem part with the new shelter approach, which is maybe less sheltering, more housing, and the complexity of getting that right may just have an impact on that actual date. So if I hear you say that that's... Yes.
The date, I picked quite arbitrarily, I've admitted that. And if you had said another date, I might have said, well, you know, if you think that's a better date. But I think we'll leave the date based on my motion, and I think it'll still be a good time to have that report.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perks, questions?
Thank you very much, Speaker. Mr. Mayor, you're not supporting reinstating the hours in the homes for the aged, are you?
No.
That motion? No? You're aware it's 17,000 hours less service to people in the homes for the aged from city staff than what we currently provide.
I'm aware again of what I've read from honest people who I think have no reason to mislead this council or mislead the public or mislead anybody else in the public service, which is that they've said that they will be able to provide, because what we're dealing with here again is not the loss of positions, but a different arrangement with respect to how we deal with people who are off on training courses and the like.
Yes,
and
so
I have read what they said, the public servants, in preparing this background material for us, and they have said that the residents will be well cared for even when we make this new arrangement. That's what I've read.
Okay, I'm glad you've read that. You heard in answers to questions earlier during the debate here today that the amount of care provided to seniors in our homes for the aged has dropped below the provincial average?
I heard that, but that is, and I heard that, I think it was on Councillor Carroll or somebody was talking about it, and I heard the various numbers, and I would say that that is a different issue that has to do with different decisions that were made at different points in time, some of which were probably made when I wasn't even here. But, and I certainly would want to look at that trend line, but to me, that trend line that deals with the broader issue of care in a macro kind of way is only very tangentially related to this, which I view as a more micro decision that has to do with replacing people on training programs, and that if we want to have a discussion or a debate about the level of care and where it should be and where it's been and why it got to where it is, I'm all ears on that. But I just don't think...
I'd like to take you up on the idea of you being all ears. Did you hear that the measure used in the OMBI statistic was the number of hours of care provided by staff to patients, and by not supporting the motion to reverse the change in elder care, that is exactly the same measure that you will be further decreasing.
I think what I read in the material that was prepared by our public servants again was that the care would be provided. There would be a number of hours of care where we wouldn't put a replacement person in, but that the care would still be provided. And this is where, again, I realize you have to measure things. I'm a great advocate of that, and I say that through you, Madam Speaker, respectfully to the member. But at the same time, I would also say that the measure of how well you provide care to people isn't necessarily entirely based on how many people are providing it or how you deal with hours that are for people that are on training courses. And I read the material coming from our own people, and unless I misread it, and I'm not able to quote it to you right now, it said the care will be provided to people. It'll just be done on a different basis by the people who will be there on the days when the people are off having training programs, and I was persuaded by that material written by public servants, not by politicians or anybody else.
Okay. To switch topics, you'll recall we had a debate not long ago about a new shelter going in Councillor Nunziata's ward. And when that came up, there was a conversation in this council that in order to make it work, we would have to provide additional resources. We did additional lighting around the shelter. We put murals up in the neighborhood. We spent a whole lot of public money to make the area around the shelter nicer for the neighbors. So my question to you is, how is it you support spending money to make it better for people who live near a shelter at the same time as here you are refusing to keep the same service level for the vulnerable people inside the shelter?
But again, Madam Speaker, through you to Councillor Perks, you are reaching the conclusion, which I believe is countered by the very material prepared for us in background to this recommendation by our professional public servants, which says, in fact, that the service levels will not be affected. It says those services will continue to be delivered to the people who are in those shelters. It's there. I wish I could stand up and quote it because it's in these materials, but it's in the confidential papers. And so I would just say to you that if I honestly thought, and that's why, by the way, though I've asked for an accelerated report so that we can get a newer person, meaning the new general manager, to take the time instead of just responding to questions that are, sometimes leading questions in this chamber, and I'm not complaining about that, it's just a fact, and let him go away with his staff and the data he has, and maybe data that hasn't been looked at before, and write us a report in pretty short order, and if it says something directly contrary to what these materials say...
One last question?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So we have had city staff in both housing and homes for the aged tell us there will be a service level impact, a reduction in the quality of service in these two services. And those are the most vulnerable people in the City of Toronto. Why is providing service to them less important to you than making sure that homeowners don't pay the additional cost in their property tax?
That was your last.
Well, I mean, again, people, through you, Madam Speaker, love to present these kind of particularly stark black and white choices as if to say that because you're not going to charge twice as much for property taxes, therefore it's a deliberate decision to do something bad to the most vulnerable people. I said earlier on, and I stand by my words, the assignment that all of us have in here, certainly the way I see it, and I realize not everybody will agree with me, is to find that balance between investing in making sure we have a stronger and fairer city, and I've supported many investments in this budget, and a lot of them were supported most strongly by me, and some of them I would even say are there because I asserted my will in that regard and tried to convince others to do so. But at the same time, I also respect the fact that we have an equal obligation to many people who are on the cusp of becoming those who need our support. And if we're not mindful of what we impose upon them as costs that they have to live in the city and make sure we find that balance, then they will be people that will at that point in time end up needing our help. And I don't want to be responsible for that, and I think that it is our job, I certainly view it as my job, to find that balance, and I think in this budget we have done so. There are legitimate debates we've had in here today about especially the shelter issue. I find it a difficult issue. That's why I moved a motion to get a report, to actually have somebody who we respect, I think, to bring back that report, and it's why I undertook to this chamber to look at it very seriously. And I think that is a step in terms of my saying I'm not going to just kind of put the blinders on and say that forever and ever this will be the decision. I think that's fair, but people will have their own opinions on that.